Surprisingly, this isn't hard to talk about. You'd be surprised that it can eventually become something that isn't difficult to talk about. You would never believe it. I was sexually assaulted by my father at age 13. So I count it as one primary event where the biggest assault happened. But, you know, ever since I was a child, there was also plenty of grooming and inappropriate behaviour from then that wasn't quite as severe as the main event. That obviously you're not going to be able to know if it's bad or not because you're a child, and if it's something you've always known, you don't know if it's right or wrong or if it's okay or not okay. And when you overall have a really good relationship with your father and everything feels okay to you, you don't really notice how detrimental certain things were until you got older. Now, this is one of the first topics I wanted to talk about on this channel actually, because of how important it is to talk about. People don't want to think about incest or sexual assault or paedophilia, and there's another type of philia. People don't want to think about that in general, never mind in the familial unit where, you know, with your aunts, uncles, fathers, mothers. Nobody wants to think about that, nobody wants to talk about that, and it's not easy. So this is exactly why I find it really important to talk about it. As a survivor, and as someone who I hope can be a bit of like an example of how your life can be lived in a really beautiful way, even after something as horrible as that happens to you. So just a brief overview of my relationship with my dad. He taught me like everything I know. Not everything I know, of course, but when I say that, I mean all the things that feel really integral to my personality today, things that I'm passionate about, my hobbies. They are so thoroughly interlinked with this man. He taught me about belief systems that I still hold today. He taught me, he was my gateway into gaming and my technology and art. Literally, I would not be who I am today without this man, and I've taken so many positive things from him. Like, you'd be surprised. It's really strange how this person had done something so... What word is there to describe that, really? Like, it's horrific. But then at the same time, this person also gave me foundational things about my life, about my human experience. It's paradoxical, and I think that like really messed me up initially, because I was like, I struggle to see the nuance. So when somebody does something really bad to me, I struggle to see that they have other good traits and that they're not only these bad traits. So yeah, there are all these things that I gained from him, and overall we had a really good relationship. We were very close to each other. We were like best friends. He was like a best friend to me. And I always said this, even back when I was like a child, not a child, maybe like an older child and a teenager, I would say like, you're more like my brother than my dad, which I think is part of the problem, really. But that kind of tells you kind of the fun nature of it. Like, we had so much fun together. We had so much fun, which is probably why when the actual incident happened, I really didn't know how to handle it. I think if he was a horrible father and he would like beat me and he never like said any nice words to me or anything, I think it would have been easier to understand like what happened was really bad. Well, I did understand that, but it's so complicated. The best way to describe this whole thing, it was so confusing. I was so confused. But at the age of 13, I knew what sex was. I knew, like, I had a good understanding that that should not have happened. I didn't go away from that thinking, oh, I didn't like that, but maybe it's okay. Like, no, I knew immediately that it wasn't okay. I knew. But I had no facilities to even start comprehending that. So I was like, I immediately, after what happened, I left the bedroom, I went to the bathroom and like wiped myself down, and then I was like, I am going to pretend that did not happen at all, and so did he. And that continued until I was 19 years old. I think a lot of people in general struggle to imagine what it's like to be a paedophile, and they don't want to understand the bigger picture. And I think people don't understand that learning to understand why they're like that and condoning their behavior or saying it's okay are not in the same group. And I tried to understand my dad, but he didn't really offer any such understanding. I put in a section of my diary just after the conversation I had with my father, because I confronted him when I was 19. An amazing thing about the relationship that I touched on in the Why I Was Cheated On video with this person, one great thing about this guy is I was so comfortable with him that I felt able to very much begin unpacking the sexual assault, and I sort of gave hints to him in the beginning that something happened with my dad, and then eventually I told him in detail over text, but I didn't really start, it didn't really hit me properly then still. It was just that I fully acknowledged, like, yeah, this bad thing happened, and yeah, it was kind of just like that. But then it wasn't until I was 19, and things were still cool between me and my dad until this point. It suddenly hit me. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. It felt really random. I was just trying to sleep. It hit me like a ton of bricks because my brain suddenly attached the words sexual assault to the situation. Before, I knew it was a bad thing that happened, but I would never have called it sexual assault. If somebody had asked me, have you been sexually assaulted, I would have said no. But it's at this point that I realised, that was sexual assault. Like, I knew it was, but it was just the level of comprehension that was needed. There was like one missing piece that went into place. I'm glad that I was still able to have like the rest of my childhood, because it happened when I was 13, so quite young. So if I fully dealt with it then, I feel like my brain wouldn't have been able to process that, and it didn't. It did not process that, but I felt like, yeah, I wasn't able to process it at that age, and at least, even though I was repressing it a lot, and just every time it came into my conscious mind, I would be like, nope, not thinking about it, not thinking about it, not thinking about it. And I remember like being in school and they'd be randomly pop into my head. I'm like, nope. So I'm glad that I could still live like a relatively normal childhood after that, which wasn't helped by like other events that happened when I was 16. Just, I don't know how much I can describe. I really don't know how much I can describe on YouTube. What I will do for those who are interested, I might write a more detailed account on maybe like Substack or something. So for those who are interested in knowing what actually happened, because I'm very open about this stuff, that's available for you. Yeah, there was another situation that happened when I was 16 as well, when I went to go see him, because my parents have been separated most of my life, but still on good terms, might I add. So I think, again, that was kind of repressed as well, so it was a very, very, very long process. It was like, what, 7 years that I was kind of like not addressing it. But then when it hit me, it hit me so hard, because it wasn't even just me. It was like, if I tell my family this, like, my siblings will lose their dad too. Like, it's not just me. If I was an only child, I feel it would have been easier to deal with. I think I would have told my mother sooner, but I was so concerned about my siblings and what the fallout of it, because I can gladly say with the utmost gratitude in my heart that I knew for a fact that it would never be a question with my mom if she would believe me. That was never a concern. In fact, in all my family members, I was never concerned if any of them would believe me, and I was right. Everyone believed me, and everybody was at my defense, and everybody supported me. So I know a lot of people don't have that, so I'm really grateful for that. But I think for that reason also is why I knew, like, shit, like, this is all, the whole family's gonna come apart. Well, a whole section of it is gonna come apart. if I do this. So I didn't tell my mother about it until I was 20. Not long after my 20th birthday. And in between me discovering that happened to me and me telling my mother, that was when the bipolar manifested, which is why I strongly believe that bipolar oftentimes is linked to trauma. In fact, most mental illnesses, I think, are linked to trauma. I had no bipolar symptoms before I fully realized what had happened. But I also think it probably manifested as bipolar because I had a lot of repressed emotions in general. I did not let myself express certain things, and I was incredibly angsty. It kind of makes sense that I ended up having a really large mood disorder instead of something else. Because I thought maybe I was going to get like PTSD or something, but I don't have PTSD in any way, really. It was fully just the bipolar switch turned on. So yeah, then my mental health naturally got incredibly bad, and for the next like 2 years I was rarely ever what is called baseline, which is essentially the mood I'm in now, where I'm just normal. I'm in my normal mood, nothing too much either way. Yeah, I would kind of just go between hypomania, depression, hypomania, depression, hypomania, depression, and I would never get a break in between. I was just entirely dysregulated. But then yeah, I eventually told my mother, and yeah, the reaction is kind of as you'd expect. She was horrified. And to be honest, even though I told her now 5 years ago, I think she's still horrified, as you would be as a mother, I would imagine. Yeah, and then everybody excommunicated him, and that was unfortunately that was hard to witness because it was weird. I love this guy so much, and we had so many good memories together, like seriously. Like I cannot tell you how much of a good time me and my dad used to have, even after the event. Like that didn't stop anything. He was my best friend until I was 19. Until I was 19. So it was like a huge hit to my heart. Huge hit. I feel, again, because it's been like 5 years, I feel disconnected from it now, largely. That's why I'm so able to talk about it, but I've spoken to doctors, I've spoken to police, I've spoken to therapists, not random people, but other people. Sorry, just checking my laptop wasn't on charge. I've had to regurgitate this story so many times that I'm thankfully just like, I can talk about it with relative ease. I know it sucks and I remember it sucking, but like, just like with the cheating that happened, I don't actively get in my emotions when I discuss it, like, in any way, actually. But it affected me so deeply. As you could imagine, I, didn't want to live quite a few times. And that's what exacerbated the things like the cheating later on. Because I had this burden that I was already carrying and this kind of feeling of great betrayal. And then when another betrayal got added on and another one later, it all felt really a lot because it wasn't the first time I got betrayed by someone who was meant to protect me, who was meant to love me. Like it really does feel world ending for real. He ended up homeless after I told my mom, because he never had it. He'd never in his whole life, I think one time he had his own place, but he very rarely had his own place. So he was always kind of floating between people's abodes and such. And so when everyone was told, and it spread like wildfire. Even people I didn't tell knew eventually, which was pretty hard. But I digress. Yeah, once everybody knew, he became homeless, so then I knew he was homeless, and I felt guilty for him being homeless, even though it was not my fault at all. But here's where the second betrayal comes in about this situation. And this is why, although most of my family were immediately on board, it clearly wasn't the case all round. Around this time, actually, I was living with my father's mother, so my grandmother, and I told her about the situation too. I told her before my mother, but she kept it under wraps. So I told her, and she acted sympathetic, and she acted like she was sympathetic the entire time until when I moved out of her house into my own place, because remember, he's homeless, without ever disclosing it to me, moved him into the house where she lives, and where I used to live. I had just moved out of that house, and I had full intention of visiting her, and also because my cat's there. She didn't tell me, she moved him in, and the only reason I found out about this is because my cousin told me. So she, without discussing it with me, without warning me, without anything, she did that. So I told her, your son sexually assaulted your granddaughter, and you let him move into your home and you don't tell your granddaughter? Like, it's one thing to move him in, but it's another thing to not tell me when I had full intention of going back. If I never was going to go back, maybe, but... So when I found out, I called her and I was like, what? I was angry. So I don't really remember what I was saying, but I was like, so do you want to explain, like, do you want to explain is kind of what happened? And essentially she said, he's my son, what am I supposed to do? I'm your granddaughter! She didn't really give me an excuse other than him being her son. So, I stopped talking to her. She would message me sometimes and I wouldn't respond. But and just to add insult to injury with her and them, I suppose, my cat then died and I couldn't bring her with me when I moved, and nobody told me until somebody told my sister. Then my sister told me like 2 days before Christmas. So I really have nothing to do with her either. Like, they both can fuck themselves as far as I am concerned, but that was the one part, she was the only person who didn't have the best kind of reaction to it. Again, she pretended when I told her that she was horrified and things, but clearly you're not that horrified if you do that, or you don't feel that upset about it. Because you'd at least tell me. If you cared about me, you would have told me that you're moving him in. Which, there was no excuse because there was actually somewhere else for him to stay. There was somewhere else for him to stay. Like, and I told him where he could stay. And she was acting like, oh yeah, well, he had no other option. Like, yes he did! I digress. That I feel actively angry about. I am angry about that. But so how did I get through it? The main thing that I got help for was... So the main thing I got help for was for my bipolar disorder that I got diagnosed with. Which I will say the team I had was really, really, like, exceptional in my eyes. I tried quite a few different medications and they never forced me. And they would always listen to me, and I had full autonomy of, like, what I did. I never felt forced. And we were constantly in touch, kept checking on me. I felt really cared for. So when I moved, it was really upsetting that I couldn't bring them with me, but they were great and they helped a lot. I ended up taking lithium, which it helped a lot. I had issues of compliance with it because, hashtag bipolar things. Other than that, it was a really useful drug for me. The bipolar was being managed, but I had to process the grief on my own. I tried therapy for a little bit, but it didn't really help much. So a lot of it was just me working through my emotions and, like, being in a really bad state of mind. But I did continue to try and make things of my life, like I was looking for jobs and, I started working, and then I moved out eventually, like I said, and then, things were going good. Things were going good, all things considered. I didn't let it stop me from living my life, but it was really hard to live life for a while. Of course it would be. But I didn't let it stop me even when I had the suicidal thoughts. I think fear of death also helped, to be honest, and fear of the actual method of doing it, which I think is a really good deterrent. So I thought, for example, there's no way to live beyond that. I didn't think there was. But then I'm here and I'm so glad I didn't do that. I'm so glad, because I've achieved and experienced so many wonderful things since then. And even though I miss my dad, or rather the memories, I don't really miss my dad, but I miss the memories and the feelings and just the idea that everything is right. You know, I miss that. And I miss having a father, even though he was more like a brother, like I said. Even though that's the case, I'm really happy with my life now. In fact, my quality of life now and my mental space and how I view myself and my self-esteem is so much better than it's ever been. Even before that event happened, it's better than it's ever been. So I literally just kind of pushed through and kept trying to do things. Like I went to college for a while, like I was trying to develop a career. Tattoo artistry, that didn't end up... I ended up kind of changing goals with that one. But you know, like I kept being ambitious, I kept trying to make things work. I found joy in the small things, even if at the time it was just going to see my boyfriend. That, you know, it was nice at the time. You can wake up every day and not even think about it anymore. Like, I rarely think about the situation. It doesn't haunt me in any way. It mainly does when I see people on the street that kind of look like him, or maybe if I see like a father and daughter sometimes. That was mainly what happened in the beginning, when I'd see father and daughters and I'd feel like an ache in my chest. But it's quite rare now that I even think about it. I'm more so focused on myself, the people currently in my life, and like my dreams and my goals and my art and my aspirations, you know? I feel okay. I feel more than okay. So this is especially to the ones who have experienced sexual assault, childhood sexual assault, and especially incestuous. The incestuous kind. You can make it. I have no reason to believe you can't make it. This is not the end of your story. This is not the end of your story at all. Your body is your own body, and your body will always be your own body. It's never anybody else's. And I'm so sorry that somebody violated you in this way. Again, somebody that you're supposed to trust, or even if it's not, just that somebody violated you. That doesn't mean you're deserving, and it's not your fault! Because I had the part where you start feeling like, did I have something to do with this? Like, why? Like, am I at fault for something? Like, there must have been a reason. It's just like shame and guilt, and it's like, these are not for you. These emotions are not for you to experience. It's for them. Stop feeling the guilt and shame for them. That is not what you should be feeling. You should be feeling... You should be protecting yourself and nurturing yourself and being patient with yourself. So if you need to, like, I don't know, if you have the ability, you know, not work for half a year or more, obviously that's hard to do, but if you can do that, like, please do it. Like, this is not the time to be a cog in the machine. Like, this is time for you to try and restore your spirit. My comment section's open. You can find my Instagram at Silverna7. I'll have the handle up here. If you want to message me privately or email me, please. Like, please feel free to do so. I'll gladly listen. I'll speak to you directly. My doors are open. But I'm really sorry if you have experienced this. And if you haven't and you're just learning about it, like, I really appreciate that you're taking the time to be aware, because it's not easy, and I really do think we need to keep a dialogue open about childhood sexual assault and incest. It's unfortunately not uncommon. I wish it was. I really wish it was, but the more I've kind of spoken about these things in general, I realize it's not this rare occurrence that we wish it to be. Obviously, you don't need to exist in your family trying to find all the pedophiles, per se, but it's important to understand that it can happen, and if your child tells you, please listen. What's the likelihood that they're making this up, really? Like, the chances of it actually happening versus the chances they're making it up. The chance of it actually happening up here and making it up is like, I don't know if you can see, like down here. So please listen. Teach your children what parts of their body should not be touched and are private, and what to do. Teach them the proper words for sexual organs as well, I recommend. I just think we should be very open and honest about these things, and instead of trying to protect the children from the subject by pretending it doesn't exist, I feel like you end up putting them in more danger by not giving them the equipment that they need when things like this may, I hope not, but may happen, because let's be real, it does. So yeah, the awareness is super important, and I really want to open a dialogue about it, so I really hope this video has done so. Yeah, so thank you if you're listening in any capacity from any point of view. We can make it through this together. Thank you for watching this video. You can't really enjoy this one, I would say, but I hope you found it informative. All the best to you, sending you so much love. The world is hard out there, so let's try and make it a bit easier together. Stay strong, stay beaming, all the love.